सिद्धिविनायक नमो नमः अष्टविनायक नमो नमः गणपति बाप्पा मोरया।
Hello, Panaben.
Hi,
Jai Shri Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna, are you okay?
Yes, thank you. How are you?
Hot.
Yes. I'm the same. It's too hot.
It's too hot. I can't take it. I hate it.
Where are you based?
London?
Okay.
UK?
No, I'm in France.
You're in France. It's very hot here in London. It must be warm there as well.
Yes, it is. It is very warm here as well.
Yeah. How's the COVID situation there?
Getting bad depending where you are, and not as bad.
Sonia Jai Shri Krishna, good evening, Jai Janendra, Namaste, Sai Ram, Jai Swaminarayan. Om. Om. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodaya. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodaya. Om Bhurvasvaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodaya. Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodaya. Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodaya. Once again, women to women, welcome you all. Lovely seeing you, all these people out of the sun, being safe like me. I'm gonna mute everyone. And invite Caroline to start off.
Okay, thanks very much, Panna. And again, I'm delighted to see how many of you are here this evening. I thought with the nice weather, maybe you'd all be out and about, but it's probably so hot that you're better indoors. But I'm melting here in Manchester. I know you're all over the country, but I think we're all in the same boat. But it's lovely to see you all. Didn't get any suggestions again for what to talk about this week, so I'm just going to share the screen, and there's a few things that I've kind of I'll show you in a second what I'm going to cover, things that I think keep coming up that people get confused about. So I'll just make sure I can, why does it do this? Now and then I should go to share the screen and it doesn't have what I want. Where's my PowerPoint gone? Right. Come out of that again and try again. There we go. That's it. Okay, hopefully you can all see that.
It would be nice if everybody had their videos on.
Yeah, it is nice to be able to see the faces of the people we've got on. I know not all of you are on devices that make that easy, but if you can, it's nice, particularly when it comes to the discussion session at the end. It's really nice to see people's faces. But anyway, I'll get on with my presentation, then hopefully we'll have time for plenty of questions and discussion. And as always, I like to start with a disclaimer that I'm not here to give you all individual medical advice. I'm sharing information and knowledge with you. If you are on medications for conditions such as diabetes or blood pressure, and you are going to embark on significant changes in your diet, please make sure that you do let your GPs, practice nurses know, so they can keep an eye on you and maybe hopefully reduce doses or even ultimately be able to stop medications. But it's important that you keep in touch with them so that you don't run into trouble. This week, as say, I didn't get any kind of burning requests from you, but I know things that people can get confused about are various foods and how to work out whether they're safe for you to eat or sensible for you to eat. So I'm going to have a quick look at nutrition labels, and also a reminder about why we go on about processed food not being good for us. And then, as I know many of you are vegetarians and quite a few are vegans, going low carb is a bit more challenging for yourselves than it is for those that eat meat and fish. So I was just going to go over the healthy protein sources that try to keep you on the low carb side if you fall into those groups. So that's my plan. And as always, as I'm going, if burning questions crop up, stick them in the chat box, and then we'll try and go through. Panna, I know Dacha's going to join us, but she's going to be a bit late. So if you could maybe keep an eye on any questions until you see her popping in, that would be great. So just an example of a food that's cropped up on another group I'm helped to advise, and somebody popped this on to say, was this safe to eat? Because if you have a look at the label on the front, it's all about being keto friendly and healthy and all sorts of things. It's saying that there's only 3 grams of carbs per portion. With something like that, you need to know what they mean by a portion. Probably isn't the whole bag by any means. It might just be a tiny, tiny amount of the product. But when you flip over and have a look at the back, then you can start seeing that there's 23 grams of carbs per 100 grams, and we are interested in total carbs because they like to separate out sugar to make it look better, because there's in a lot of foods there's less sugar than there is total carbs. But as I keep telling you constantly, all carbs end up being broken down to sugar. So we are interested in total carbohydrates. This one only has 23 grams of carbs, of which 12 grams of sugar, but it's also using another sweetener. So that immediately sends a few alarm bells to me that although this food is claiming to be healthy, they're putting stuff in it to make it tasty, but they're not necessarily all good for you. And as we go down here in the ingredients list, we can see they've got things like organic brown rice. Well, they're using the term organic a lot to try and help you to think, oh, this is really healthy. But we've got maple syrup, we've got erythritol, we've got coconut butter, which in itself isn't too bad. But we've got quite a few things here that altogether are adding up to a lot of carbohydrates that are going to just ultimately end up as sugar. So although they're saying there's only 3 grams per portion, that portion, if there's 23 grams in 100 grams, that portion is going to be something like 10 grams, which is tiny. And I bet they're the sort of thing that you'd probably eat half the bag. So it's not going to end up that healthy food that they're trying to claim it is on the packet. So that's one example of where you really need to be careful. The marketing guys are out there all the time trying to fool you. And another product that I feel they're constantly trying to fool us with are these health bars, these energy bars or healthy snacks. Well, again, if you've been with me for a few sessions, you'll know that I'm trying to discourage you from snacking. If you eat really good, well-balanced main meals, you really should not need snacks, and your body needs a rest between meals in order to be able to digest and utilize the previous meal. So we shouldn't be snacking, but we need to be really careful if we are choosing meals like this. Occasionally, this might be something you have in the car if you think you might miss a meal and you need to have something because you don't want to allow yourself to get so hungry you'll eat something bad. But this is being marketed as a natural protein-packed health snack. And this is the list of ingredients. And you can see that the second ingredient is glucose syrup. You've got soya protein. Well, soya protein's not always the best. Shredded coconut. Coconut breaks down to sugar. Honey, crisped rice, rice sugar. Everything on this label, bar a couple of items, is sugar. And yet on the front, it's telling you that it's a natural bar. So really, really be careful of these sort of things. And I've just got on the next slide, the nutrition label for 5 different flavors of that Eat Natural bar. And as you can see, per 100 grams, there's 23 grams of carbohydrate in each bar. Or per 100 grams, the bar might only be half of that, but it's not the healthy snack they're trying to make out on the front. So again, be very, very wary of things that are marketed as healthy. If they're processed, i.e. they're made in a factory, there's every chance they're not going to be healthy. There are some quite nice recipes for homemade granola type bars and things, which again, you'll find easily if you Google keto, low carb, energy bar or keto, low carb, whatever. Always put recipe after the words when you're searching, otherwise you'll come up with branded goods like that. So the general rules that I would give you for looking at labels are, if there are more than 5 ingredients in a product, so don't just look at the nutrition grid, look at the actual list of ingredients as well. And if there's more than 5, you need to study it very carefully, and really you're kind of starting to think already, I don't think this will be good for me. If you don't recognize any of the names of the ingredients, again, they're probably chemicals and all sorts of flavor enhancers and things, which again will not be natural and will not be good for you. If they're usually listed in, they have to be, I think, legally listed in the order in which the quantity of that product is in the food. So the higher up the list the name is, the more of it will be in the end product. So if you see something like sugar or the equivalent, like I've just shown you, you've got sugar, you've got honey, you've got sweeteners. If they appear in the first 3 ingredients, then you really should be avoiding that food, because that means there's a significant amount. And also be wary of fats in processed foods, because if they're described as vegetable or canola oils, they again should be avoided, because we really don't want you eating those particular fats. Check the total carbs, as I've just identified to you, not just the actual amount of sugar, because quite often on the front it'll imply there's only a small amount of sugar, but actually when you look at the total carbs, there's a much, much greater figure. Beware of the marketing tricks. And just my favorite example is the tin of beans. Now these are supposed to be 50% less sugar baked beans, but if you look at the total carb count, per 100 grams it's 9 total carbohydrates. Per half a can, which is deemed to be a serving, there are 20 grams of carbohydrates in that low sugar baked bean tin. That means that when you eat a serving of those, you're still getting the equivalent of nearly 5 teaspoons of sugar, even though on the front it's trying to convince you it's healthy because there's 50% less sugar. So you really, really need to be careful. And that's why we really prefer you to avoid anything processed and make your own food from scratch. As I know many of you do, but a lot of us with busy lives sometimes resort to packaged and canned foods. And we really do need to be aware of this. So why are we so anti-processed foods, apart from the reasons I've just described, that they can be very misleading and contain all sorts of ingredients that really aren't healthy for us? When companies that make processed foods are looking at foods to market, they want foods that will have a good shelf life. So they'll have to find ways of making food that might naturally deteriorate quite quickly last a lot longer in either the packet or the tin or whatever the frozen end product that they're making. And that nearly always ends up in the detriment of the beneficial and nutritional value of those foods. They replace some of the best parts of that original food with chemicals or sweeteners or more salt or whatever to enhance the shelf life, but we lose a lot of the nutritional value of that food along the way, or the heat treatment or whatever that foods have to go through to be made into long life products can destroy many of the nutrients. So that's one of the reasons. An example of how we completely lose all the nutritional value of the original is something like flour, wheat flours. And this is one of the reasons why, again, you will hear us say, try to avoid all products made with flour, traditional wheat flour, because nowadays, all you're getting in that wheat flour that you buy is the starch. They've removed the husk and the wheat germ because they're the more unstable elements of the grain that are not going to give it a long shelf life. But that's where all the nutrition is, the fiber, many of the nutritional micronutrients, they're in those bits, and they go in the bin or they go into animal feed. They don't end up in the packet of the flour that you buy. And all you're getting is the starch. So that's why bread made with traditional wheat flour, pastas and so forth, they're all just pure starch. And even though they call them whole wheat, they're not the true whole grain. They are still just the sort of got a bit of the husk left, to call it brown or whatever, but they have refined it quite considerably from the original whole grain that grew. And indeed, they're breeding flour varieties now that have less of the husk and make it easier for them to refine, so that the flours that we use now would resemble very little the flours that our grandparents would have used, because the whole thing's become so much more industrialized and refined. So that's just one example of how modern foods and the refining process has ruined the nutritional value. As I say, as well as wanting to enhance the shelf life, the manufacturers also want to make the food tasty. And they'll use cheaper ingredients because they want to make a big profit. But in order to make that cheaper, long life food tasty for us, they will add a lot of sugar, even to savoury foods. It's fascinating to me to see sugar popping up in just about every tin or can you pick up. And you think, why on earth does sugar need to be in this? It's a savoury dish. But it's all about that moreish, that bliss point of mixing fat and sugar that makes people want to eat more of it. So that's another reason why we really don't like these processed foods. Plus the cheaper oils, the canola oil, the vegetable oils, these will be refined oils that have been, not only the original product is not great for us, but the way that they produce the oil involves all sorts of heat treatments and chemicals that are simply not good for us and highly inflammatory. So another reason we want you to avoid them. So in order to keep these foods, as I've said, they do all these different tricks and things along the way, and often add preservatives and treatments that simply destroy many of the micronutrients of that product. So they may try and claim on the front that all sorts of goodness is in the food, but you can bet your bottom dollar there will be nowhere near as much nutritional value to that processed food, to the equivalent homemade variety of the same sort of dish. When it comes to juices and smoothies, again, I've mentioned to you before that you should eat your food, not eat your fruit, not drink it. And this goes for vegetable smoothies as well. One of the benefits of vegetables, as well as fruit, is the fibre that they contain. As soon as you blitz it in a liquidizer or food processor, you are absolutely ripping apart that wonderful fibre that does us, our guts, so much good. So you're getting none of that value. And when it comes to fruit juices, it basically just turns it into liquid sugar. Fructose is a highly dangerous sugar. Of all the sugars, fructose, which fruit contains a lot of, is very, very easily converted by the liver into triglycerides and quite harmful to the liver. And drinking lots and lots of fruit juice is the quickest way to get a fatty liver. So it's really, really bad for us. So please don't have fruit juices. If you want to have oranges and citrus fruits, have the whole fruit. Use slices of lemons and limes to enhance flavours and so forth. Obviously squeeze a bit of juice for flavour into main dishes, but if you want to actually have the juice, it's much better to have the whole fruit. And one of the reasons why we recommend berries and to avoid the tropical fruits is because the amount of sugar, fructose, per grams of useful fibres that you're getting is much greater in those berries than it is in the tropical fruits. You're going to get much more of the fructose from the tropical foods and much less of the fibre benefit. So try and stick to berries rather than any of the more tropical fruits. Apples aren't bad, but again, shouldn't be over-consumed. And citrus fruits, particularly oranges, just be aware that they do contain quite a lot of fructose, and don't overdo it. And if you eat the whole orange, it's hard to have too many. Whereas if you have a glass of orange juice, you're having the juice of the equivalent of about 6 oranges. And you'd never eat 6 oranges in one sitting. But if you did, you'd be getting all the fibre, so you'd be absorbing a lot less of the fructose. Whereas when you drink it, even the ones with the bits in, unfortunately, the fibre's been destroyed and it's just all going to be absorbed straight into your bloodstream, which is bad news for any of us, but particularly if you do have pre-diabetes or diabetes. So on to the protein. So we talk about the macronutrients as being carbohydrates, proteins and fats. And of the three, carbohydrates are non-essential. We do not need to consume carbohydrates for health. We will naturally get a little bit of carbohydrate from vegetables and a little bit in the protein foods we eat. But we don't need to eat carbohydrate, pure carbohydrate, for health and for life. We absolutely do need to eat protein for life, and we need healthy fats that contain very important vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins and amino acids and so forth. So healthy fats and proteins are essential to life. Carbohydrates absolutely are not. Protein is probably one of the most difficult things for you to get when you are vegetarian, but particularly when you're vegan, because most of the protein that omnivores consume is in the meat, fish, poultry and so forth that they eat. So when you're not eating those products, you've got to work a bit harder to get that protein. Proteins are the building blocks of the body. So when we're children, we need lots of protein to help us to grow. When we're adults, we don't want to grow too much, particularly around the middle, but we still need to repair all the time. Our body is going through a constant process of damage and repair. And we need a certain amount of protein to help that body to tick over and stay healthy. So it's really essential. The other good thing about protein is that it's a backup to our fuel source. Should we run out of energy from fat, bear in mind all of us are carrying a fair number of weeks, actually, unless you're incredibly skinny, you are carrying around constantly several weeks worth of energy in the fat that you are storing under your skin, you know, around your body. Some of us in some places more than we would like. So we don't need carbohydrate for energy. We've always got fat for energy, but protein is a backup. So should we not have enough fat, protein can also be turned into energy by the body. So they are the two essential components. So what do we do when we're not eating the animal sources? Well, if you're vegetarian and you eat eggs and dairy products, then they are one of your best sources. We always say full fat dairy. And we also want you to get the best quality eggs you can, preferably free range, even better organic. We want those hens to be picking at their food out and about around the farmyard and in the fields if at all possible, because they will be eating all sorts of nutrients then that will make their eggs even more beneficial to us. If they're factory farmed, unfortunately, the grain they're fed doesn't produce as nutritious an egg yolk. So try and get the best quality eggs you can. Full fat dairy, the low fat versions will always have unwanted products added to them to make them palatable if they've removed the fat. Dairy fat is very healthy. In fact, there's some good studies that show that eating a good amount of dairy fat actually protects you against conditions such as diabetes. The old idea that fat from eggs and dairy and so forth is bad for us and clogs our arteries is absolutely not true. Our dietary intake of fat does not affect our lipids, our cholesterol levels, etc. That's a whole different mechanism. So don't fear fat. So if you do eat dairy, then go for the full fat version, and that's going to provide you with protein as well as healthy fat. If you're vegan though, then you are really relying on the plant varieties, and tofu and tempeh are probably the two with the highest sort of protein ratio per 100 grams. Nuts and seeds then come in as a very healthy additional source, and of course they contain healthy oils as well. If you're eating the whole nut or the whole seed, you're getting more than just protein, you're getting really healthy fats. But with nuts particularly, you do need to check the carbohydrate level. Things like cashew nuts are very high carb, whereas almonds, walnuts, pecans, macadamia are all very low carb, quite a lot of good healthy fibre and plenty of protein. So they're good ones. Dark chocolate, and by dark chocolate we mean not Bourneville, Cadbury's Bourneville, that's hardly qualifies as dark chocolate at all. We're really talking about 85% cocoa solids or higher. That way you're getting much less of the sugar from the product, and there are elements within dark chocolate that we know are very healthy. very good for our blood vessels. It's also quite hard to overeat dark chocolate. A little goes a long way. So if you have got quite a sweet tooth, we do sort of say that maybe if you start on 70% dark chocolate, that's reasonably easy to get used to. And then once you've kind of got used to that, you can start having a go with the slightly higher. And nowadays you can easily get hold of chocolate anywhere from 70% right up to 100%. Have to admit, I would never be able to eat 100%, but I can manage 90 now and really enjoy it. So I play around with that. But a little bit of dark chocolate is really good, and it's actually quite a good way if you're feeling hungry. I think a square of dark chocolate really stops you having that sort of, oh, I need to go and eat something that's going to be bad for me. It kind of satisfies me and keeps me going till the next meal. But it's also got, as I say, really good health benefits and some protein. Now, when we're talking about protein sources for vegans, you cannot do worse than chia seeds. 28 grams provide you with 6 grams of protein and 11 grams of really healthy dietary fiber that your gut needs. I'm sure you've all heard talk about the microbiome, that wonderful colony of bacteria that live in our guts that have so many useful functions, and they need good insoluble fiber to really thrive. So something like chia seeds provides a really good lining for the gut, and it really helps to nourish those microbiota that we need so much. And chia seeds are very useful. I mean, they can just be chucked in into bread mixes and so forth, but if you soak them, they produce a sort of jelly-like substance that can be used in the place of eggs to help with vegan baking. They can be made into sort of chia porridge, chia jam. There's all sorts of wonderful things. Sorry, I've just noticed a typo on here. I mean a vegan diet in that last point, not a vegan diet. But they are a very valuable component. If you haven't met chia seeds or used chia seeds, they're widely available now. And they're an incredibly good source of protein and fiber. And in fact, all of us could do with eating a few, never mind those of you that are vegans. And they've got no carbs at all. So they're a fantastic low carb protein and fiber resource with huge, huge variety of uses. So as I say, if you haven't experienced chia seeds, good idea to look at them and try them. So when we talk about low carb, and particularly for people who've got type 2 diabetes and people who want to lose weight, we really like people to try and get under 100 grams, preferably nearer to 50 grams of carbs a day. But that's really, really hard for you to do if you're vegan, because you need your protein, and so many of your protein sources will come with carbohydrates. So you need to get savvy about the best options to get your protein and keep your carbs to a minimum amount. But realistically, it's hard to go lower than 100 to 150 is something reasonable for vegans to aim for. Now, if you're currently eating a very high carb diet, you will notice a difference if you get it down to that. Might mean you struggle a bit when you get nearer to ideal weights. But you know, if you're only eating a maximum of 150 grams of carbs a day, you should still be able to remain pretty healthy as long as you're getting that balance of protein right. So be aware that foods that a lot of you will be eating frequently, such as lentils and chickpeas, more than 50%, they are 50% plus carb. Now they are a good source of protein, but you're getting a lot of carbohydrate to go along with that protein. So we certainly realistically can't expect you to leave them out, but perhaps try to reduce the amounts of those you're eating and replace them with more leafy vegetables or some of the other beans that are much lower carb. Green beans, broad beans, red kidney beans have a much lower carb content. Again, broad beans and kidney beans are not low carb, but they are much lower than your lentils and chickpeas. So it's a question of trying to do a few replacement things or substitutions in recipes that you're used to. So as I say, just be very aware of that and try very hard to keep those really starchy foods like your breads and so forth to an absolute minimum. Experiment with some of the low carb nut flours to see if you can get some good results. Or have them as a once a week treat rather than every day. And obviously the same goes for rice, be it white, brown or whatever. It's just pure starch, and particularly if you're struggling with diabetes or you're pre-diabetic, you really need to get the amounts of those sort of foods low. You can make really good replacements for rice with cauliflower, or using the noodle makers for things like courgette. You can have really nice alternatives to starchy foods. Shredded cabbage makes a really nice base to put a curry on. There's lots of alternatives you can have. I think part of it's psychological, that you always have those foods with your main dishes, and you really don't need them. If you've got good amount of healthy fats in your food, as well as good amounts of protein, they should keep you from being hungry, and then you can just use vegetables to help supplement, rather than going for those starchy breads and so forth that you're more used to. And just a final reminder that these two books are very, very useful. The carb and calorie, the general carbs and calorie counter, is available as an app. There is a small charge for it, but it's a very useful app. But you can buy the book as well, or instead. And they've got really good pictures with portion sizes that give you not only calories, which we're not so interested in, but they give you the protein and the carb count for the foods that can help you keep on track with how you're doing with your protein and your carbs. So because they've got a really good visual presence, it really helps you to get in your head the sort of meals you're having and how much of everything you're eating. And the world food ones, unfortunately, only comes as a book, but it has got just about every kind of cuisine you can think of in there. So some of your common staples, you'll be able to see just how good or bad they are. And again, it will help you to adjust. So I really do recommend those as a good resource to have to hand when you're planning your meals. Okay, I think that was it. That's all I wanted to say. So I will stop sharing my screen, and let's have a look at any questions that have come up.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, hi, Dacia.
Hi, that was lovely. Thank you, Carolyn. Do you want me to read the questions, or?
Yes, please, if you can, because it'll save me scrolling.
So, Carolyn, is chapati flour the same as like wheat flour you mentioned? Is it full of starch?
I think that's yes, isn't it, Dacia? I think
Yeah.
the usual chapati flour is unfortunately a wheat-based flour. Or if it's chickpea-based, chickpeas, as I said, I think chickpeas are something like 60% carb. So unfortunately, the flour will be very refined and just very starchy.
Yeah, definitely. And then we've got one about the label that you showed.
Oh, yes.
I think the baked bean ones. It's like,
yeah,
please help me understand the label better. For example, total carbohydrates is 20 grams, of which sugars is 12.
Yeah.
So what is the 8 grams made of? Why is this not clear on the labels?
It's not clear on the label because the manufacturer doesn't want you to realize just how much carb is in there or how much sugar is in there. The other 8 grams is other starchy components. So all starches are just basically, you've got sugar, basic glucose, which is a single molecule of sugar. And then you've got things called disaccharides, which are also on the sugar side of things, which maybe have 2 sugar molecules. Starch is just a longer chain of sugar molecules. So anything that's starch might not be called sugar, but it's broken down to sugar. So they will just be, carbohydrates are basically sugar molecules. They're just longer sugar molecules or longer chains of sugar molecules. So the way the manufacturers unfortunately do it is they tend, because they think people will be fixated on sugar, and if that's a smaller percentage of the total, they hope it'll fool people to think, oh, well, that's not so bad. But really what you're interested in is the total carbs. I hope that's helped.
Hopefully, that was clear. And then we've got Kirti's question. How about making juice with fiber in a mixidizer? No, it says mixidizer.
The trouble is, if you add fiber, that fiber is never as good as the original. So in order to make fiber products that we buy, yes, they have got some fiber in them, but it's nowhere near like the real thing. Yeah. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Dacia.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. But I'm not sure if she's asking whether a liquidizer would break up the fiber more. and this mixidizer wouldn't.
Yeah, could you, is it Katie?
Kirti,
Could you tell
yeah.
us what a mixidizer is? Feel free to unmute yourself and speak to us if you like.
Yes, sorry, it's me. I normally mix orange and apples and everything, but not to, I would not sieve them. I will just eat with all the fiber in a mixidizer. Would it be as good as eating a raw vegetable? Just, I mean, the fruits.
What is the mixidizer?
You know, those liquidizer we have.
Yeah.
Where we process, yeah, just a liquidizer. It just breaks up the fiber.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as soon as you start doing that, it's breaking the wall of the fiber. It's just turning it into mush. So it will no longer have the same properties when you're digesting it. So you're always better to eat the fruit or the vegetable whole.
Okay, got the point. Thank you. Thank you.
And then there's a really good question. How much protein do we need daily?
Right. Well, there are various complicated ways of working that out. Have you got one to hand, Dacia? I haven't.
I haven't. It's something to do with our weight, isn't it?
It is. To be honest, around for most women, if you're very tiny and petite, probably around 80 grams would be the aim. It's anywhere between about 80 and 120 grams for your average person, depending on your height and your body mass. But that's something there are ways to calculate it, which I know if I try and look for it now, I won't find in a hurry, which we could put on the WhatsApp group for you. But the thing to remember is that, particularly if you were a meat eater, for instance, 100 grams of meat is not 100 grams of protein. That meat will be made up of all sorts of things. The same would go for your nuts and your seeds. But obviously, if you're looking at the packaging and the nutritional value for the nuts and seeds you're eating, it'll tell you how much protein per 100 grams is there. And then you need to work out what size portion you're having. And that will help you to work out how much protein you're getting from that particular food. But it's somewhere, does that sound right to you, Dacia? Somewhere between about 80 and 120 grams per day of actual protein. But that would obviously be a lot more food, because all of those different foods, only a small percentage of them will be protein.
That's correct, yeah. The next question you've answered, I feel, but I'll read it out anyway. Are lentils good? Are lentils a good source of protein for vegetarians? And we covered that really, but
yeah, well, just to reiterate, they are, but they are carby. So, you know, over 50% by weight is carbohydrate. So it depends whether you're just going for a healthy diet, or whether you need to lose weight, or whether you're a diabetic. If you're trying to lose weight or you're diabetic, then you need to be conscious of how much you're eating. And I would try to find, you know, to possibly reduce the portions you're having, so that you can keep your carb count down to that less than 150 a day. So a lot will depend on how many you're eating already as to whether you need to cut back much. But there are some good bean options that are lower carb that you might be able to substitute part or all of the lentils in certain dishes.
yeah. Can I just add something to that, please?
Of course you can.
When you make these lentil dishes, obviously they're delicious, but to reduce the amount of lentils in a lentil dish, you can always add some vegetables like courgette or something that will kind of almost disintegrate into the dish.
Yeah.
So you're still having the dal and you're still able to enjoy all the flavors, but you're making the amount of carbohydrate in there.
Yeah, you
less.
can really bulk it up, can't you?
Yeah.
With these I like grating courgettes into things, because it does give you much more of a bulk, so you don't feel you're missing out. Or sometimes I'll shred cabbage. White cabbage is particularly useful because it doesn't have too much taste, so if you shred it finely, particularly, I mean, I used to do this with my kids when they were younger. They had no idea they were getting cabbage in casseroles and things because it was, you know, shredded in and mixed in, and they didn't really notice it. It's great to put in soups. So yeah, so you just have to get clever with your nice leafy vegetables and the things that have got very little in the way of carbs, to help bulk up a lot of your meals.
And initially, you could always start by adding just a little bit of vegetables and then
Yeah.
slowly increasing it, because then it's not a case of like you're suddenly going from all lentils to too much vegetable. You can just do it slowly. So it's manageable, and your taste and texture of it will, you'll adapt to it.
Yeah.
Is chapati, are chapatis bad for us?
Yes, they're very high carb.
They are.
So unfortunately, as I say, the problem with all of these traditional foods is when that's all people ate, and often they didn't eat anything like as much as we eat now, then that's why they're part of the staple diet for some cultures, because that might have been the only carbs they were getting. Whereas now, unfortunately, we're eating them with all the other stuff as well, all the other stuff that's just not good for us. And therefore, the amount of carbs in those versus the value they give you nutritionally is out of kilter. I hope that makes some kind of sense. So, high days and holidays, or look for recipes. And say YouTube is fantastic. If you put in the search box, low carb chapatis, you will find recipes. So there's lots of people out there that are now experimenting with low carb versions of a lot of people's favorite foods. So you can experiment, or just have them once in a while, not every day. It is hard, I say, particularly if you're vegan, it really, really is hard. But the thing to try and minimize is the really high carb foods, and concentrate on the ones that have got much more nutritional value. And the trouble is the chapati's really got nothing good about it. It's just carbs without much in the way of nutrition. At least your lentils are giving you protein as well as those carbohydrates, but your chapati's not really doing much for you at all. Multigrain flour, I can see there. If it's wheat flour, it's just bad, I'm afraid. Modern wheat flour is just starch. I don't care how multigrain they try and tell us it is. Most of them are refined, and they're just ending up being broken down to sugar.
Yeah. And as Carolyn said earlier, the grains are cultivated. They're very different to what your grandparents would have eaten. Completely different. They've bred these plants to give a high yield and to so that they aren't diseased easily. They're just different. They have things done to them that aren't so natural. Your grandparents, great grandparents would have also probably made their own flour. They would have had one of those gunti. Is it gunti? Yeah, it's like a mill that they mill it at home. I lived in Tanzania for a while, and that's like how they did. So the flour was fresh. So, all the goodness was in there still. I've heard people who are intolerant of gluten in this country can go to places in India, especially the villages, and eat the flour there, and they can tolerate it better, and it's better for them.
Because the grain is probably still intact, and they're not getting the gluten.
Yeah, and they're probably still maybe using some kind of ancient grain. That's not the modern grain that we're subjected to here. Food is very different to how it used to be, and our lifestyles are also very different. But anyway, that's a topic for another day, isn't it? Really? So the next question: is there a healthy alternative to margarine or low-fat spread other than peanut butter, reduced sugar jam, or butter to spread on toast? So,
well, the first thing that's wrong with that sentence is the toast. We don't want you eating the toast, basically. The butter is fine. We don't want reduced sugar jam because that's still going to have sugar in it. You can make chia jam, as I mentioned, and again, you will find some quite nice low carb recipes using fruits and things like chia seeds. But a traditional jam is just fruit and sugar, and the fruit's boiled down to release its fructose. So it's just bad news for your blood sugar. Low fat spreads, absolutely not, or margarine. There's nothing wrong with that butter. If you have to have a piece of toast, have butter on it, but we'd really rather you weren't eating the toast unless it's toast made with a low carb bread. Peanut butter gets used a lot in quite a lot of low carb recipes that I see. I don't quite know why it's so popular, because we're not madly keen on peanuts. They're not really a true nut, they're a legume. But you can get some really nice almond butter, or you can make your own almond butter if you've got a high-speed liquidizer. And I use almond butter quite a lot in things. And actually, almond butter spread on a piece of toast. Not that I eat toast, but it would be just as nice as peanut butter. So there is no healthy spread. All spreads, even spreadable butter, that's a good opportunity to mention. The spreadable butters have had stuff added to them to make them spreadable. Stuff that should have got no place in butter. So please don't use spreadable butters. This time of the year, you don't have to have your butter out of the fridge very long and it's spreadable anyway. I sometimes use the microwave at a very, very low intensity to soften butter if I've left it in the fridge too long. But there is no healthy alternative to the likes of butter. End of, really.
I couldn't agree more. And then Sheila is asking, she's really sorry, but she's missed how much carb is allowed and how much protein is needed. So could you just repeat yourself there, please?
Okay, so the carb, it's not so much about how much carb is allowed. It's all depends on who you are and what your aims are. Most of us are, even if we're healthy, are eating too much refined foods, which is full of carbohydrate. I honestly feel that 150 grams a day is more than enough for anybody, no matter how healthy you are. If you're vegan, it's very, very hard to get below 100 grams a day. And I said that really aim for between 100 and 150 grams per day. If you're vegetarian and you eat dairy, then you might be able to get below the 100. And anywhere between 50 and 100 will usually see great results in most people. We talk about keto diets sometimes, and somebody that's on a keto diet has really got themselves down to like 20 grams of carbs a day, which is achievable for people that eat a wide variety of foods, but it's really very tough for a vegan to ever get that low. So carbohydrate is simply not essential for life. So it's not about how much should I have or how much shouldn't I have. It's really about keeping your body healthy, eating natural sources of carbs. So when we talk about lentils and other vegetables and so forth, nuts that contain some carbohydrate, though at least are healthy sources of carbs, as opposed to any of the refined flours, breads that we've just been talking about, rice, and all the snacks that are sold today that are just full of carbs and other processed horrors. So I hope that's helped a bit. It's not about how much is allowed, it's about what your diet is like. Are you vegan? Are you vegetarian? Are you an omnivore? And what do you want to achieve? But probably 150 grams a day is the maximum that I feel is sensible for good health.
Definitely, it depends on the person.
Yeah, and the protein I mentioned earlier, somewhere between 80 and 120 grams, but I will look for an easy, there are some very complicated ones, but I'll try and find an easy protein calculator, if you like, and put it on the WhatsApp group.
Thanks, Caroline. Now, I don't know if this person, Laksha, said, is farina flour compared to other flours? How is farina flour compared to other flours? But I don't know if she means Ferrari flour. So Laksha, iPhone on here, please. Do you want to just unmute yourself and just clarify? That'd be really helpful.
Yes, because I've not heard of that.
So,
hello, no, it is farina flour.
farina
I
flour.
bought it from Tesco. Yes, it's in a bag, 1 kilo bag. And I made bread rolls from it. So I was just thinking, how is it compared to other flours?
Have you got a list of ingredients on that bag of flour?
Yes, that's a please. Yeah, just 1 second. I'll get the bag.
Yeah, I'm just looking it up as well.
Sorry, I forgot to say please.
It's very similar to rice flour.
Oh, is it?
Right. It says energy fat is 0.8 grams, of which saturates 0.2, carbohydrates 72.4.
So it's the same as all flours then, I'm afraid.
Right. No, because it's 72 in 100 gram.
Yeah,
so it's literally, it's no difference. Thank
Yeah,
you
it's
very
pretty
much.
much the same as any
Yeah.
flour, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
That's
Yeah.
why we tend to recommend the nut flours, because that's the only way you get a really lower carbohydrate percentage, because nuts tend to be a much lower carb food. So the nut flours, ground almonds, coconut flour, you can grind just about any nut to make a flour, but they tend to give you the more low carb end results. Chia seeds are available just about every supermarket now. I buy, if you have a Costco membership, you can get really good sized bags of chia seeds very reasonably in Costco's, much bigger than you'll see in the supermarkets, but places like Holland and Barrett, you'll find them. I buy a lot of my foods of this type online I use Buy Whole Foods online, but there are quite a lot of health food online retailers now. You often will find them cheaper online, but Costco's is probably, in terms of the, a store you physically go to, is probably the cheapest place I've seen them. But they are very widely available now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I expect Lidl and Aldi
Yeah.
probably would sell them too. So
Yeah, they become a very sought after ingredient. So the supermarkets are usually pretty quick to catch on. So I'd be surprised if you couldn't find them in your local, wherever you normally do your shopping. They'll be in the kind of health food section, if you like, where you find flax seeds and things like that as well.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if our Asian shops do them too.
Well, I would imagine so, yeah.
Yeah. Is rapeseed oil okay to have, and what are legumes?
Legumes are the kind of lentil type family, aren't they, Dacha?
Yeah.
So,
like pigeon peas and all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
They're all legumes.
Yeah, it's just a collective name for that kind of plant, I suppose. Rapeseed oil is okay, but it's got a higher ratio of omega-6 to 3. Omega-3 is really good for us. Omega-6 we need a little bit of, but we need the ratio to be very balanced. And things like olive oil and coconut oil are a healthier balance. Rapeseed is a little bit leaning towards more of the omega-6. So it is much cheaper, which is, always the way. The things that are less good for us are always cheaper than things like avocado oil and olive oil. And rapeseed oil is sold with the strap line that it's got a high smoke point, so you can use it for a lot of frying. But to be quite honest, unless you're vegan, ghee is probably as good as anything for frying in, or coconut oil, and then have the olive oil, because we prefer you to use the virgin olive oil, the cold pressed olive oil, and that's really for dressings and things like that, rather than, or just very gentle sauteing, perhaps with a little bit of ghee mixed in. But I wouldn't use olive oil for high heat cooking.
Same. NT is saying they've looked up the protein thing. There's different sites say different things and they're confused.
Well, that's probably because there isn't an absolute consensus.
A
lot of nutrition has not been well studied, and it's only really now that a lot of medics are starting to realize the importance of good nutrition, and starting to understand it better. So you will find slightly different suggested daily amounts, but I think you can't go too far wrong. There used to be a thing about if you have too much protein, it's bad for you. I think you'd have to be, particularly if you're vegetarian or vegan, you'd have to be working really hard to eat far too much protein. I think we're much more likely to eat too little. And as we get older, we need a bit more protein to help, because we naturally lose muscle mass and so forth as we're getting older. So in order to try and maintain good muscle mass, we need to make sure that we're really eating adequate proteins, maybe even a tiny bit more than we did in our 50s. So, I think unless you are, that you are gorging on something that's very high protein, which you won't be if you're a vegetarian, I don't think, it's quite hard to overdo protein. I'm more concerned about people, particularly if you're vegan, not having enough. So I think it wouldn't do any harm if you're vegan to do a bit of daily calculating, and if you're getting less than 80 grams of protein, you really need to try and up it. unless you are absolutely minute, because I'm pretty certain that 80 grams is the lowest in any of the scales I've seen. 80 grams a day is the lowest quantity, and it ranges with most things I've looked at between 80 and 120.
Next question is, are protein shakes okay to have as a vegetarian? I can't get it all from food.
Sorry, say that again.
So this person who's asked this question, they can't get all the protein from food because they're vegetarian. So are protein shakes okay?
We don't really like anything that's processed and pre-prepared like that. Have you really looked at all the options? Do you eat eggs and dairy if you're vegetarian? Whoever asked that question.
And Auntie, it says on here. Do you want
No,
to
it's
answer?
Nish. Sorry, it's Nish. I asked that question. No, I don't eat eggs. I have dairy, but again, I can't get 80 grams with you know, being on keto as well. It's very difficult.
When you say you're on keto, does that mean you're trying to keep the carbohydrates very low?
Yeah, less than 20 grams.
Yeah. Why do you want to do that?
Because for health reasons.
Yeah, I think it's a trade-off sometimes. As I said, when you're vegetarian and vegan, getting really low carb is hard, as well as maintaining good quality fat and protein intake, particularly protein. You might have to sacrifice having a small amount of extra carbs in order to get that protein in through the nuts and seeds and so forth. It's a trade-off, really.
So you don't recommend, sorry, so you don't recommend the protein shakes then?
They're very artificial. The protein that you'll get in those will not be as good quality as you get from real food.
Right, okay.
I'd be curious how much carbohydrates in that protein shake anyway.
No, it's very, very little. It's only like, oh yeah, I make sure it's very little carbs.
You
making it about 1.5 to 2 grams per portion.
Where does it say the protein's being sourced from?
It's whey. So it's predominantly from milk, right? So dairy from dairy.
Right, and it's got, I'd be surprised. Well, what brand is it?
I use a couple of brands, but My Protein and Bulk is predominantly where I buy my protein shakes from.
Right.
Would you mind taking photographs of the ingredients and the nutritional information and putting it on WhatsApp?
Sure,
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Sure, I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, because as I say, it's it is tricky when you're vegetarian to get that balance. But Dacha and I are sort of from a kind of a thinking that anything that's processed and manufactured is never going to be as good as real food. So we'd much rather you were getting your protein from real ingredients than from something like that. Because nutritionally, there's usually a trade-off. You're losing something that's of value to get that product. So, if it means upping your carbs just a little bit, if you can keep under 50 grams, you're still pretty, that's very low carb. But you might just manage to get that little bit of extra protein.
There's a multigrain flour chapati question, but we've covered multigrain and chapati flour, so we'll leave that one. Can you please suggest a good vegetarian protein shake? So I think we've just covered that we don't really recommend that, really.
I've just seen the one about a neighbour with extracting fruit and veg juices using a masticating juicer, which preserves nutrients. Yeah, I don't know. I would suspect that that's not the whole story. This person reversed the diabetes by using it. And what else was he eating? You're quite right. I think no matter what kind of juicer, it would be breaking down the fibre. But I would need to know what he was eating and drinking before. It might just be that having gone over to fruit and veg juices, he was dramatically reducing the carbohydrates. He'd still be losing out on his fibre, which long term might not be doing him any good. But if he's managed to reduce his carbs in his diet, because he's replacing meals with these juices. In the short term, I could see that helping him, but it's not what we'd recommend. But I'd need to know a bit more about that. Do you think, Natasha?
Yeah, I definitely need more information. Yeah, absolutely.
People can successfully reverse diabetes using very low calorie diets. They need very, very strict guidance, and they need to then learn how to start eating healthily again and not undo all the good that they've done. So, you can get quick fixes, but we prefer the real food option, because you do it. I mean, some people can reverse the diabetes very quickly, just swapping to real food, having eaten a lot of junk food. But, eating real food is the way to long-term good health. Oops, sorry, somebody's set off an alarm. So, I'd need to know a lot more about that.
Yeah, definitely. It's not straightforward at all. What's the best low carb bread?
Well, there's a variety of recipes out there now using things like almond flour, coconut flour. There are some that are vegan that use, say, things like chia seed gels instead of eggs. So yeah, there are quite a few. I've got almond flour and psyllium husk recipes, and somebody's put there that they make chapatis, and certainly one of the recipes I've used does unfortunately have eggs in it, so it wouldn't be great for vegans, but that can be made into either bread rolls or flatbreads, which, depending how thin you roll them out, can take on an alternative to all sorts of things. I've experimented with 1 or 2 vegan recipes, but because I'm not vegan, I haven't sort of pushed it too far. But there are some good recipes out there for vegans using almond flour, psyllium husk, coconut flour. So they're out there. What I would say is, if you're trying to lose weight, particularly, try to not be expecting to eat bread all the time, because the almond flour bread rolls I make are delicious, but they're quite energy dense. So I try not to have them regularly, because at the end of the day, if I'm trying to lose weight, we try not to talk about calories. We want to eat nutrient dense food, but some nutrient dense food can also be very energy dense. And if you're trying to lose weight, you need to keep the balance. So it's trying to find alternatives to always expecting to have bread with meals.
Yeah, some of it's about just changing our behavior over time. It is,
because some of it's habit. I mean, I was, a sandwich for lunch person for years, and it took me a while to get my head to understand that I would be satisfied having a lunch with a good salad that had good protein and fat balance in it. And it does, it satisfies me perfectly well, but I just had it in my head I had to have a sandwich at lunchtime. So a lot of it can be psychological and habit based. So it's taking a leap of faith sometimes to just change the way we eat.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that probably all of you have gone from eating real fats when you were younger, like ghee, etc., to all this margarine and low fat stuff that the government have been telling us to do for years and years. So you made that habit change. So you're all capable of making changes. It just takes time, and it's just about remembering the benefits that those changes will bring to your overall health and well-being. There's a question here about millet and sorghum flour. They're just alternative flours that Asians tend to use.
Still very high carb.
Yeah, they're still really high carb. I think the only advantage is I think both of those flours are possibly gluten-free.
Yeah.
So there's that health benefit. So it's a case of whether, so it's better from a gluten point of view, but from a diabetes point of view or weight loss point of view, it's not really going to help. Yeah, it's not going to help.
And that's a really good point to mention, that gluten-free products are not automatically low carb, because I think a lot of people have got it into their heads that the gluten is the carb bit, and it's not. It's just a particular element of the flour. So most gluten-free products are still very high carb. Somebody's
Yeah.
very kindly put a protein calculator.
Oh, cool. Oh, yes, I think they have, yeah. Multi.
But that's coming out at quite a low percentage of, low amount of protein. 140 pounds, what's that in stones?
About 70 kilos. Sorry, not stones.
About 10, isn't it?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
That seems quite low, but
Yeah.
we'll have a look. As I say, there are a number out there, but that would be an absolute minimum. I suppose it's a 50-year-old sedentary. I would say as you're getting older, you want a bit more than that, even if you're sedentary, because you need to be maintaining that muscle mass. Yeah, just found it on there. I'll have a look. I've got one or two that I know. I just can't put my finger on them at the moment. I'll put them on the WhatsApp. Corn flour, unfortunately, is also high carb, but obviously, if you're using corn flour in very small quantities to thicken a dish that's going to be divided into 4 or 5 portions, then the amount per portion isn't going to be huge. So used cautiously as a thickener, it's not the end of the world. It's got gluten in it though, so you know, it all depends again on what your needs are. Arrowroot and 1 or 2 other what's the other thickeners that are out there?
Tapioca starch?
Yeah, there's a few alternatives to corn flour, but unfortunately they're pretty much all got quite a lot of carbs in them. So you do need to watch that you're only using them in very small quantities. Full fat cheese, somebody's saying, yes, that's a very healthy source of fat and protein and calcium. The chia seeds that I mentioned before are full of micronutrients, so they really are. I don't like to talk about superfoods, but chia seeds have got an awful lot going for them in terms of the micronutrients, as well as being a good source of protein and 0 carb. So, but cheese, certainly, if you eat dairy, cheese is a good source of healthy fat, as well as protein and calcium.
There's a good question here about tofu. Is tofu okay to eat? Surely soya is not good for us.
Soya, I mean, soya is a problem because some of it's not grown and produced very sustainably. So it's a tricky one. I think, Dacia, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are tofu for people who have that as the prime sort of protein source is probably okay, because tofu is fermented, and that's the key difference between normal soya and tofu. And it's been in the Japanese Oriental diet for years and years and years, but it's because it is fermented, so there is a big difference.
Yeah,
try and buy the best quality always.
Yeah, tempeh is, I think, marginally more nutritious than tofu, but I don't know how available it is here anymore, but tofu tends to be the one that we were aware of most in the UK. But that is absolutely right. And I think the person that's asked the question has obviously heard that soy is not necessarily good. I mean, it drives me nuts, soy milk and so forth. You know, particularly people that are going on about meat harming the planet. If they looked at the way so many of these vegetarian products are grown and so forth, they're not sustainable. And there is quite a lot of negative about soy in terms of nutrition as well. But the fermented variety, such as tofu, is actually a very valuable source of protein for vegetarians, particularly for vegans. So we have to include it as a useful source. But I would always try, I mean, everything I buy now, I try to make sure I'm buying it from a reputable supplier that is trying to produce it sustainably and is not adding anything unnecessary to it. So it's buying the best quality. We should all be eating an awful lot less of whatever we eat, whether we're animal eaters or not. We should all be eating less, but trying to eat food that's been produced in a sustainable way. Rather than a lot of the very big manufacturers mass-produce stuff that's all ruining, whether it's vegetable or animal, is ruining the planet. So it's about trying to do your best to get the best quality ingredients.
there's a question. Well, it's not a question. Well, it is a question. Can almond flour and psyllium husk be used to make chapatis? I think it can.
Yeah.
I'm going to see if I can find a recipe.
I'm
and
pretty
I'll put it on
certain
the
I've
WhatsApp.
seen some. I've certainly, as I say, I've seen a flatbread recipe that works quite well using almond flour. And it does have egg in it though, but I'm quite sure there are versions without the egg for vegans. It's probably not going to be like your traditional chapati exactly, but it does the job. It can be helpful. I found the bread rolls particularly helpful when I was trying to wean myself off the kind of way I used to eat. So at least I was having a sandwich with something that was healthier than the old white bread or brown bread or whatever. So the same could go for a chapati alternative. But hopefully gradually, as you learn to get more creative with the vegetables and the other sources of protein and fat, you'll find that you don't need some of the things that you just automatically eat because you're having a curry, and you always have a chapati with a curry. It's a really good curry. It shouldn't need it. But you know, it's all about retraining yourself.
And I think I've said in the past that if you really can't make the changes, you know, like you can't manage without a chapati, then just have less.
Yeah,
you know,
don't have them every day and only have one. Or
yeah, so you know, you can make changes that suit your lifestyle. You know, any change is a positive step in the right direction. We've got a question about oils to use for Indian cooking if we're not able to use rapeseed oil.
Coconut oil, avocado oil. If you're vegan, you won't want ghee, but if you're not vegan, then ghee is still a really good staple. I use a lot. But I always have coconut oil. It's a good temperature gauge, actually. My coconut oil is completely liquid at the moment.
Mine too.
But I like avocado oil as well. So, you know, I have avocado, coconut and ghee on the go all the time. And then I always have my bottle of nice olive oil that I use for dressings. And if I'm doing just very gentle sorting at low heat, I sometimes drizzle olive oil on things. So, you know, if you're vegan, those coconut, avocado and olive will all be good to have in your cupboard. Feta cheese, I'm seeing, yeah, feta cheese is fine. Again, go for the, I'm always accidentally picking up these wretched low-fat versions that the supermarkets are trying to push on us. So check your packaging, make sure it's the full-fat version, but and check the carb content because they will all vary slightly. But most full-fat cheeses will be on the lower carb side.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there an ice cream for diabetics?
Is there a
ice cream for diabetics?
Ice cream. Well, I don't. You will find. I haven't seen anything in a supermarket because I haven't looked in the ice cream section of a supermarket for a very long time. And if they do put it out there as diabetic, it's probably got sweeteners in it. And to be honest, we'd rather you avoid sweet stuff than eat things with sweeteners in them, because the sweeteners fool the brain into thinking you're eating sweet stuff. So some of the harm that's done by sweet food still happens metabolically, even if you've got sweeteners. Some of the artificial sweeteners are positively harmful as well, the cheaper ones. I make a really nice ice cream that it doesn't need an ice cream maker. It's literally just, again, this is not going to suit the vegans, unfortunately, but it's literally just eggs and cream. And the recipe has sugar in it. And I have now got less than half the sugar in the total recipe. And that means that per decent portion of ice cream, there's about 4 grams of sugar. And to be honest, I'd rather have that every now and then than something that's got loads of artificial stuff in it. So I'll very happily share that recipe with folks if the people that do eat dairy would like it. It's really tasty. It goes down a bomb with my family, none of whom are diabetic, none of whom are interested in low carb, but they all love that ice cream. And they've not noticed that I've more than half the sugar because it's so creamy and delicious. So I haven't actually seen a diabetic ice cream personally, but if there is one, I bet it's full of artificial stuff.
I make an ice cream, but I've not made it for a while. I make it with coconut milk and cinnamon and turmeric. And I think there's some dates in there, but I don't know. It's probably still better than shop bought stuff.
Absolutely.
You know what the ingredients are.
Yeah.
And I make it a bit like kulfi sticks in a lollipop maker.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's portion control there. So I can try and find that recipe.
Yeah,
and
we can
share
put both of those on, and that would suit the vegans. And then it's the other one, as I say, it's sugar is something that we need to keep to minimal amounts for diabetics. And the ice cream that I'm making now, as I say, you shouldn't be eating it every day, but a decent portion has only got about 4 grams of sugar in it, so that's not awful. And the carb, any other carbs in it will be fairly minimal, because it's just there's no carbs as such in eggs, and full fat cream is very low carb as well, so it's very it's pretty healthy if you're going to have ice cream.
Yeah.
Some people make ice cream as well by literally blitzing full fat yogurt with frozen fruit. You have to make it and eat it immediately. But the frozen fruit, if you've got a liquidizer and you throw in the frozen fruit into some full fat yogurt and blitz it, the coldness of the fruit makes it all go quite stiff. And if you eat it immediately, it's a bit like eating ice cream.
Yeah, like the soft whippy kind of ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that'll be minimal carb, because if you're using berries, strawberries or raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, those sort of things frozen, it's all keeping the carbs pretty low. And that doesn't need sweetening. The fruit's sweet enough. So there are ways of doing it, but better to do the homemade than try and look for a ready-made portion. I have there are, you know, the Paleo Canteen guys. Actually, they've produced an ice cream which I did buy when they first launched it, but it's got sweeteners in it, and there's a lot of the sweeteners I can't tolerate. They just, the taste, to me, they taste horrible. So bless them, they've tried, but I didn't like it, and it was very, very expensive.
It can also cause gut issues, can't it? Because of the way.
Yeah. So you're better making your own. So we'll put a couple of recipes on the WhatsApp for you.
Where can you find the diet for low carbs if you are diabetic?
There's one of the best websites is Diet Doctor, dietdoctor.com, and they've got all sorts of suggested menu plans for people depending on what they're wanting to achieve, and they do have very good low carb, and they do have some vegetarian and vegan suggestions. That's a good website to go to. There are a number of good websites, and diabetes.co.uk, which is different to diabetes.org. They've got quite a lot of suggestions, and a very good chat forum where people can share ideas and recipes. There are a couple of good general practices that have got lots of information. It's not specific to vegetarian, so that they're all resources that we've mentioned before, but we can perhaps repost some of the websites that we'd recommend. And I mean, Google anything. If you Google low carb vegan, low carb vegetarian, you'll find, and you can put Asian or whatever you want, whatever word you want into the search, and you will find recipes. Just be wary of the ones. There are quite a few low carb websites that do promote an awful lot of baked alternatives, sweet goods alternatives. And whilst they're nice for high days and holidays, we're really trying to encourage you to do with much less sweet food, because, as we've just said, a lot of the sweeteners still kid your brain into thinking you're having sugar, and so some of the metabolic effects of that will still happen, even if it's an artificial sweetener that you've used. I can see somebody's asking about stevia, and of the artificial sweeteners, stevia is one of the better ones. Stevia, xylitol and erythritol are all okay. Some people like them and some people don't. I have a real sensitive issue with being able to taste artificial sweeteners. I don't really like many of them, but that's an individual taste. For high days and holidays, there are things you can make for celebrations and so forth, but would really like people to get away from the idea that you should be eating that kind of stuff every day, because once upon a time we didn't. It's all come about really in the last 40 or 50 years that sweet snacks have become part of the daily diet. We're just simply not meant to eat sweet stuff constantly. It's supposed to be an emergency store for us to eat before a period of famine, rather than a constant diet of it.
NT says that they've got some recipes with and without eggs for alternatives to the normal chapati stuff. So thank you for that. We'd appreciate you sharing those.
Yes. Anything anybody comes across that works well and that is genuinely made from whole foods, please do share it.
And then earlier, you know, we talked about corn flour. Somebody's put, I think they were referring to cornmeal flour, which I'm not sure what that is.
No, that sounds to me like it's probably just another flour. The corn flour that we use as a thickening agent is, as we said, we've discussed, cornmeal sounds to me like it would be closer to the original grain, and therefore probably very carby, probably used more for bread making and things, and therefore larger quantities wouldn't be good. Somebody's putting a good suggestion here, which is their new dessert is 5% total yogurt with berries and a small sprinkling of saffron.
Oh, that sounds good.
I've not tried the saffron, but I'm all for the yogurt and berries. I have that a lot. In fact, I've got some strawberries waiting for me at the end of this, which I should probably have some Greek yogurt with. Sounds
lovely. Is frozen yogurt healthy?
Oh, well, again, it's probably sweetened yogurt, and it will undoubtedly be low fat as well, because an awful lot of the yogurts out there, they've reduced the fat, and therefore they've replaced that with sugar or starch or some other thing to thicken it. If it's sweetened frozen yogurt, it's sweetened frozen yogurt, and it won't be very good for you, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Again, directed to the label, just look at the ingredients list and then have a look to see how many grams of carbohydrates there are. Yeah, we'll happily share the recipe. And then there's Frank's ice cream for anybody who wants a ready-made diabetic.
Okay, well, just have a look at the ingredients, folks, because a lot of the stuff that's made for diabetics is low fat, because of course the NHS is still preaching low fat for diabetics rather than low carb. So it could be that it's full of other stuff that's, you know, not great, and therefore you'd be far better making the sort of stuff I make, just with a very small amount of sugar. That's it's not going to do huge harm and will be much more enjoyable to have occasionally.
Yeah, and you know what ingredients you've used.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing in it that shouldn't be there. Because as I was saying in the processed food section of my presentation, unfortunately for most of these things that are going to have a shelf life, stuff is going in there that has no place going into our bodies. So just be wary of that.
Yeah, I'm just seeing if I can find any sort of like ingredients for it, but I'll see if I can find it later. And
yeah, Greek yogurt, absolutely. When we talk about yogurt, we really are talking about full fat, and the best full fat yogurt is the Greek, or the Greek style. I mean, some of the supermarkets make their own Greek style. Most Greek yogurt will have a minimum of 5% fat. It's anywhere between 5 and 10%. And I think it's just delicious. It's better than cream. So that's what we want you eating. We don't want you eating anything that's had fat removed from the original full fat milk that's gone into making the product. If you're vegan, or like Dacia doesn't eat dairy because it doesn't suit her, you've got to be wary of the coconut yogurts that are coming on the market, because a lot of them have got sugar added. So you've just got to get reading your labels. I mean, I'm a pain to get behind in the supermarket because I'm picking everything up and looking at the labels if it's something that's new to me. And invariably it'll have attracted my attention because of what it says on the front about how healthy it is, how low this or high that it is. And inevitably when you read it, it's just marketing propaganda, and it's actually not a healthy food at all. So do get savvy at looking.
Have you seen this about Alpro do a 0 carb vegan yogurt too.
Right.
I'd
Be
love
very
to see
interested
what's
to
in
see
that.
what's in it.
Yeah, same.
Because of course Alpro, I know they make a variety of things now, but they originally started with soya, and that would be the sort of soya that Dacia and I are less keen on in terms of its health properties. Coconut would be much better, but it's a question of what else they've added to the coconut to get it to a yogurt type product.
We've used a nice coconut yogurt in the past, and it's quite healthy, but it's still got tapioca starch. So
they need to thicken it, don't they?
Yeah, so we use it very rarely. It's not like...
honest, I love to get a can of good quality coconut milk and leave it in the fridge and then open it, and you get this wonderful thick coconut cream. I went through a phase of trying to leave out dairy products to see whether I had a problem with them. Pleased to say I didn't, but while I was trying that was my daily. Instead of my Greek yogurt, I would have this lovely creamy coconut stuff with my berries in the morning, and it is delicious. So, you know, you can do simple things like that, but be careful with coconut milk, because again, the cheap varieties have got stuff in them. You want good pure coconut milk. But coconut cream is delicious. Yeah, it doesn't need any sweetening.
No, it's go on. Sorry, Puna.
I was told that coconut has a lot of cholesterol. It builds up your cholesterol more.
No dietary sources of fat cause a change to your serum cholesterol. That's a myth that has propagated for far too long and has been well and truly dismissed.
Okay.
Cholesterol problems are for all sorts of other reasons, usually the metabolic problems that we're trying to reduce with this low carb approach. Yeah. You do not need to worry about dietary fats as long as they're healthy fats. And coconut milk, coconut is one of the few vegetable sources that is higher in saturated fat than many animal sources. But it's okay to eat saturated fat, especially when it's from a natural source like coconut. So please don't be concerned about dietary fat and cholesterol. The reason that cholesterol is a problem is a whole different thing, but maybe we should cover. That could be a good topic actually for another meeting, is what the issue is there.
Because my cholesterol is genetically built. And it's very high.
Yeah. Do you know what your triglycerides are like?
It is very high.
Yeah. Well, triglycerides come about through carbohydrate intake rather than fat.
Okay.
Because excess carbohydrates get turned into triglycerides. So if it's familial, you might always struggle to get it down. And as long as you're leading a healthy lifestyle, you shouldn't be overly concerned about that. But dietary fat and cholesterol are two completely separate issues. So don't be frightened of healthy sources. What we should all be eating much less of is the unhealthy fats, which are the processed ones.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody was asking if this Zoom discussion could be on the WhatsApp group, but Panna records the session and she will put a link to the recording, and therefore you can listen in your own time. So we can't just put all the questions and answers on their WhatsApp, but the recording will be there for you to listen to. And you can, as with any recording, sort of fast forward if you want to miss out my presentation, just get to the discussion bit.
Yeah.
There's a question about lactose-free fruit yogurt. Is that good?
Oh, do you know, I haven't looked at the label of one of those to see what else is in it. I mean, if they're using, I know there are lactose-free milks out there now. So if that's what they're using and all that's in it is the lactose-free milk and the cultures, but anything that's fruit tends to have sweeteners in it because there's only a little bit of fruit and most of the flavor is artificial. So once again, look at your ingredient list. A good yogurt should literally only contain the milk and the cultures, nothing else.
Yeah. And also I think if you're having lactose-free yogurt because you're intolerant of dairy, sometimes people can still be intolerant because it's not just lactose within the dairy product that people are intolerant to. There are other elements that make up dairy that can cause issues with people's digestion and gut health and overall health even.
Yeah, somebody's asking for a session, so maybe the next session I could focus on cholesterol and fats in the diet.
Mm.
Speaking of which, Panna, we're on a Wednesday tonight. We had moved to a Tuesday.
Yeah.
When do you want to set the date for the next one? 2 weeks from yesterday would be the 3rd of August.
Yeah.
So
3rd
back
of
to,
August.
back to a Tuesday night on the 3rd
Tuesday
of August.
night. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fine.
okay.
Yeah.
Is that we'll set that one then, everybody, and I'll aim to cover fats and cholesterol.
Yeah, I'm just going to check my diary for the 3rd. Yeah, that should be fine.
Great.
Yeah.
Maybe Davina will be able to join us then.
Yeah,
but,
hopefully. Lovely.
Okay, well, I think we've got to the end of these questions and probably time for all of us to go and cool off again.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I hope that's been helpful once again, everybody. And Dutch and I'll add a few things to the WhatsApp group, and then we'll come back in a couple of weeks to talk about fats and cholesterol.
Yes.
Thank you.
3rd of
everybody.
August. 3rd of August will be cholesterol and more diet conversations. Thank you very much once again, Laksha and Caroline. Lovely seeing all these people who are quite keen to know what is going on.
It's great to see the numbers we've got.
Yes, we had 60, but as time goes,
Yeah,
it
that's
went down.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye. And thank you, Bonaben,
Thank
for hosting.
Yes, thanks again, Panna. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for
Okay.
putting your time in. Thank
Take
you
care.
again.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Good night, all. Stay safe and
You
You
too.
keep
Thank you.
hydrated. Drink lots and lots of water.
Bye, Panna.
Thank you all. It was such a
Thank
lovely
you.
session.
Thank you.
Thank you for a lovely session.
Very
You're
helpful.
welcome. You're